Peter, thank you for coming along. Welcome on behalf of Peter and Keboola. Thanks for attending the webinar. So just a couple of housekeeping tips and tricks, really. So it will be about 30 minutes. Please do ask questions. If you can turn your volume off, obviously, we're not going to be taking questions verbally, but if you type them out, we'll be picking them up and actually we'll incorporate them into this webinar. So please get your thinking caps on as and when. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, and then other than that, really, we're going to be talking with Peter. So I'll let Peter obviously introduce himself. So again, thanks very much for coming along, Peter. Yes, I'm assuming everybody can hear me first of all as well. We've just bought a nice big microphone which you can't see right now, which is an interesting piece of tech. So hopefully it's picking everything up. I believe it's okay. I'm getting a nod, so we're all good. Right. So Peter, welcome again. Thank you. I guess where we start is, would you like to introduce yourself for all those people who don't know? Because clearly they're not using social media because obviously you've got a fan base, I think.
That's very kind of you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm Peter Jackson. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Southern Water. I'm the first Chief Data Officer that Southern Water have had. Prior to that, I was Head of Data at the Pensions Regulator. And prior to that, I was in consultancy, working on data strategies in fast-moving consumer goods and financial services. I've been around data for 17 years.
So you are definitely an expert then.
We'll get that far.
So I guess probably a good place to start is, can you tell me a bit about your journey in becoming a CDO?
Yeah, more than happy. I started off as a business analyst, and I think that's probably one of the essential skills a CDO really needs. You need to understand the business context in which you're working and understand where you can add business value. So I started as a business analyst. In '96, somebody said to me, this World Wide Web thing is going to be big. And I didn't believe them for about a year. And then I thought, oh, yes, they're right. And I became a self-taught back-end developer. Started with Cold Fusion. I had learned COBOL at university and Fortran, so I knew my way around coding. And that progressed. Back-end developer, went into being an operations director of a software company. And from there, I realized the real value to a business led in data. So I started developing data strategies, and I've always been distinct about that. It's not how you are using your digital technologies, it's how you are using the data within those digital technologies. And then when I saw that the pensions regulator were advertising the role actually as a head of data, one of the first government agencies that was doing that, I thought this sounded very, very interesting. They had a particular problem that I thought I could help with. So I went there. At the right time, that was when there was a huge amount of interest around CDOs and heads of data, and then the opportunity opened up at Southern Water.
So when would you say that a CDO became? I mean, because I'm involved in the industry, CDO seems like comes up a lot as a title. But when was it the fashion? When did it start?
I think there's always been the CDO in a way that the Chief Digital Officer, and I think they've been around for 10 to 15 years. And I think that's something we need to separate out and understand the difference between those two roles. I'm sure we'll get to that later on.
Yeah.
I think that 4 years ago, when I was doing developing data strategies, I was often talking, we were saying a moment ago, to the Chief Marketing Officer very often, or to a compliance officer, sometimes as Chief Financial Officer. Very rarely was I developing a data strategy with a Chief Data Officer and head of data. I don't think at all I was ever talking to anybody like that. So I think it's something that has occurred in the last 3 years. I know some of the audience out there and some of my contemporaries and peers have been sort of heads of data or heads of analytics, really fulfilling that kind of role. But I think the label of the CDO being recognised in an organisation probably in the last 3 years in Britain.
Yeah, was there an early adopter of it in another country, or is it?
I think the States have been ahead of us.
Right.
I think that we're fast on the curve behind.
Excellent. So a question that I know that you definitely, because we were discussing it before, but because we mentioned it. So what do you think the importance of the CDO is, and has this been a result of the push towards digital transformation?
The importance of the CDO, to me, is very simple, and it's a line I come out with quite often. An organisation just will have a CFO, a Chief Financial Officer, who looks after the money. If an organisation can see the sense and clarity of that, and if data is an asset to the business, if data is a thing that's going to transform their business, or give them a competitive edge, or improve their compliance regulation or their asset management, then surely you need somebody who looks after that asset. You don't give it to somebody else who looks after it on the edge of their desk, like a CTO or marketing. Actually, you need somebody who has a global overview of the whole organisation, who can see all the data from the organisation, see how it's governed, how it's managed, maintains its quality, and then can exploit it on behalf of the business. So just change data finance, that's what the CFO does. You make the argument for a CFO, you need a CDO.
Do a lot of businesses, now this is something I've wondered about, do a lot of businesses just assume like the head of analytics might do it, or like a CTO might do it?
I think you're absolutely right. I think they often end up with a split between the two roles. The looking after, the collecting, the storing, the processing, kind of data governance will sit with the CTO, and then the exploiting will sit with the head of analytics. And I think that's a difficult divide. I think that the role of the CDO sits above those two, seeing the global view of data within an organisation. Going back to your previous question,
so we get to digital transformation.
Towards digital transformation, I think often digital transformation in an organisation, let's face it, digital transformation has been going on for 15 to 20 years.
Yep.
The onset of a website, pushing customers online, pushing customers into mobile devices, pushing customers into apps. That's digital transformation. And very often that has been led by a chief marketing officer, chief customer officer, perhaps CTO. Who says there's a better way of doing this than doing it with these platforms. Let's push people online. I think that the significant thing, the data transformation or the data-enabled transformation is being driven by CDO. In other words, how do you use the data in those digital platforms to drive competitive edge, to drive insight, to drive operational efficiency?
So do you think people are just misusing that term now? Or do you think, would you, in an ideal world, if we could control that, just drop the digital transformation as a thing?
No, I think there is a place for digital transformation. I think that a lot of organisations are still on that digital transformation curve of putting operations, putting customers, putting supply chain into a digital environment online. And I think digital transformation includes pushing a lot of services into the cloud. That's a digital transformation. Software as a service, platform as a service, X as a service. But I think there will always be, quite separate from that, data-driven transformation.
I can't say I've ever heard anyone actually make that distinction. I can't, maybe we should start using it actually and start pushing that, because I do think it does get confused.
Yeah. I think there are organisations, and I'll include Southern Water as one of those, who see data driving innovation. And so perhaps it is data-enabled innovation rather than data-enabled transformation. I don't know. I think there's some interesting terms to talk around.
Yeah, interesting, very interesting. So you've demonstrated how important the role is. So why do you think so many businesses don't have the role? And what are the consequences of not having a CDO?
I think a lot of organisations don't have a CDO because that role is currently being fulfilled by somebody else. And that somebody else may be Chief Marketing Officer, or it may be CIO or CTO. So I think that's why they don't have one, and there hasn't been a case put into the organisation such as the one we started with about the CFO. What are the consequences of not having one? You don't have that global overview of data. You don't have a specialist who understands everything from data governance to data science, driving the exploitation out of the data.
Interesting. So would you say you'd need to educate, I don't know, potentially like the CEO and the CEO into the fact that there are distinctions, and do they need the education to then bring in a CEO?
I think often it is the CEO or the executive leadership team that needs that education. to make that decision and make that happen. And very often I think that that decision is driven either by an organisation wishing to gain competitive advantage. And how else can we get competitive advantage? It's in the data. Who's going to do the data? Well, we need a CDO. Or I think also it's around compliance and making sure that your data is assured. Who's going to assure our data? Who's going to be concerned about the quality of our data? Who's going to understand how to profile data to say that's a good data set and that's a bad data set, or this data set's degrading over time? Who's going to do that? A CDO.
Yeah. It's really interesting actually, because I mean, related to that, because of the wide variety of skill sets, do you think maybe in the next 3 or 4 years we'll see CDOs having a much more kind of planned route into that role, as in you'll recognise that they will need certain skill sets? Because from my experience, so take a head of insight for instance, it's a really varied skill set role. Like some people are coming from marketing, aren't analysts at all, but actually I was speaking with the head of insight that actually is from an analytics background.
Yeah.
You know, they very much number orientated and falling into the head of insight role. But those, putting any two heads of insight in the same room, will have very, very varied roles. And do you think, is there a way of kind of funneling it so that everyone will be not templated, because you don't want people to be templated, but have certain boxes that need to be ticked?
Well,
I didn't write that one down, either, sorry.
That's a very tough question to answer, and I think the simple answer to that is no. I think currently, and we talked about this earlier on, Caroline and I have talked about this before, is that we see at the moment that CDOs, the current sort of breed CDOs, are coming from 4 places. They're either coming from IT, they've moved across from technology, they're either coming from a governance background, and I think with some of the things in the financial sector and regulation and GDPR as well, there's a drive to have a CDO, or some of those roles being filled by people with governance background. I think some people are coming from strategy, transformation, strategic transformation, and I think some are coming from the analytics, data science part of the world.
Yeah.
That last one, I think, is the one that's going to grow over the next 3 or 4 years as that becomes a more mature profession and some of those people progress in their careers. I think that's probably underrepresented at CDO level at the minute. I think that the mix of skills as to what you need in an organisation between those 4 skills, the balance between them, largely depends on the organisation, the maturity of that organisation, the maturity of its IT, the maturity of its legacy systems, the maturity of its marketing function, its relationship with customers and its assets. So I think that there isn't going to be a template. I think it's going to be almost, this is the right fit for that role. And I think that the right fit for that role may change over time. So first generation CDO may solve a lot of the problems in an organisation, may put in a really firm basis platform and have a very strategic view. And then you might have somebody who comes in with a more analytics background who can build off that base. So I think I don't think there'll ever be a template.
Interesting. Right. So kind of evolving that a little bit, and you might well have actually kind of touched on it a bit, is how do you think, so if someone's watched this now, maybe they're a CEO, they know that they need what you're talking about. How would they go around introducing that into their business?
I think a CEO, or whoever is doing recruiting, has to be think very hard about where they're going to have the CDO reporting into. Certainly because the CDO role is so cross-cutting, so horizontal across an organisation, the CDO has to report into somebody who can really empower them.
Right.
Really empower them. With budget and persuasion, backing, unless the CDO, of course, is sitting on the board or executive leadership directly themselves. I think without really strong, clear backing, because of that horizontal line across, because of it is the new kid on the block, butting up against other functions that have existed in an organisation for a long time, I think that the CDO would fail. Or find it very hard. Just going back to your previous question about the template, the skills required, and certainly one of the skills that whatever the background of the CEO, whichever of those 4 spheres they come from, they need to have good communication skills. Because they need to explain quite complex concepts and ideas, strategies, quite complex business value cases because often data is just seen as a cost center, and we're adding value into other parts of the business. So being able to give that narrative and that understanding, building bridges, capability to build bridges into IT, into the business, up and down in the business. I think one of the skill sets, without a doubt, is needed is good communication skills.
It's quite important across the board, I guess, but quite often the bigger the business gets, the less, or the poorer the communication channels quite often. So, what do you think a data structure in a business should look like? If you could wave a magic wand over every business and that would be the ideal data structure, what do you think it would look like?
I'll tell you what we set up at Southern Water.
Yep.
Because we were almost starting from a blank canvas apart from one team. So we have 4 teams in data. We have a data exploitation team who are responsible for managing the data and for exploiting the data into dashboards, into BI, and the data science team sits in there. Over time, as the data science team grows, I perhaps see them moving out of there to something different. But it's a nice, safe place for them to be, very close to the data. We then also have a data delivery team, which is our engagement team as a business. So there we've got data business analysts, we've got data project managers, a bit of DevOps, and they're the people who are engaging with the business, understanding what the business demand is for data products and services, and then controlling that demand into the exploitation team. We then have a data governance team. We have a head of data governance with a team underneath him, and their responsibility is data quality and data standards, and ensuring that data ownership is effective across the business. And they're responsible for maintaining the information asset registers with each of the business units. We then have an information services team, which is slightly unusual, and they're interfacing to the business around, they are sort of the specialist users of some of our big data systems like GIS and SAP. So rather than having those roles constantly repeated in the business units, they are the subject matter experts for using those systems, who use them on behalf of the business for the difficult data inputs, different data outputs, discussing with IT about future configurations of those systems.
Right, so they'd be the bridge between IT
and the business.
Yeah, and the business. Okay, that is interesting. That sounds quite unusual.
I think it is, yeah, and I think that's part of, as I was saying at the top of this, context is really important, the context of the organisation, because we have these big systems that need interaction with, and that's the way they were set up, that's kind of the legacy we've got.
I think it's probably one of the biggest changes that I've seen is that traditionally, I guess, the insight role was sitting between the analysts, I guess, and the business to translate, not that it needs to, but to translate that. But it's interesting that actually you've got, sounds like you're taking it the other way, and it's more between the gap between IT and the data team is more important. Because I've found, and certainly I've worked with lots of analysts, that they are delivering their own insight a lot of the time. So I do think there is probably the biggest need is between the kind of the IT and the tech bit and the data bit needs to be bridged, because I have been in rooms and they're all pointing at each other saying, "Isn't that your job?"
Yeah, yeah. Very, very important to have clear understanding of who is responsible for which, and that's not only between data and IT, that's between data and the business as well. Really important, who's responsible for which. And I very much see our data team role as governing and preparing managed data sets for the business to exploit. And the data team may be exploiting those into dashboards or reports or whatever, because they have the expertise, they have the tooling, they can do it faster on behalf of the business. And the business then would use those dashboards and the drill downs and the filtering or whatever for the further insights they need.
Interesting. So kind of changing tack a little bit, and this is one that is very close to my heart as well, is how important is the role of data technology in the structure you described as well? I mean, obviously from Keboola's point of view, we are a tech company, so we often wonder how important to someone like a CEO actually put, how much importance do they actually put on that tech?
Huge importance. Any data transformation involves people, technology and processes. And that's what we're going through at the moment. And it's that balance and the constant move between the 3 points of the triangle. You need to get the people on board, understand why data is important, create the new data culture, create new ways of working, which then lead you into processes. How are we now going to handle data? How are we going to produce these reports? How are we going to govern data? Often that requires new technology to enable that. So it's a balance between the three, and I think the balance shifts in importance depending on which part of the transformation you're at. You certainly can't do any significant data transformation without all three of those. The data technology is so fast moving, it's so powerful now, and it's so accessible that you can bring sort of flash to bang very quickly.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. It's something that we really notice is the speed that people the technologies, and just our own, but actually plenty of others we've always been
certainly the new data technologies, and there's loads of them, they will enable the new processes. You couldn't embed those new processes, operationalize them without the data technology, and you can do it quickly. Anything like software as a service or platform as a service or cloud-based, and you can't engage people to do those new processes if they don't have the technology. So you then need to reskill your people into the new tech.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's one of the big challenges is actually make it recognisable, but certainly when we're developing our tech, is make it recognisable so the training time is as low as possible. Obviously, there's always going to be some kind of training time, but I remember working for businesses and they bring in a completely new CRM system, and for the first 3 months, everyone was just sitting there going, I have absolutely no idea what this functionality does.
Absolutely. If it's not easy to use, it won't get used. And because it is so easy to switch between different cloud providers, software as a service providers, if it's not being used for that reason, it's too hard to use, you can use something else.
It's really easy to disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Maybe we should go back to vendor locking, and it's really difficult. So, what do you think will be the biggest challenges for a CDO in choosing the right technology? What kind of boxes do you have to tick?
I think that it's a very confused marketplace at the minute. It's a very busy marketplace. There's a lot of new players coming into the data technology, whether it's around extraction, transformation, load transformation, storage, analytics, data prep, data profiling. It's a very busy marketplace. And I think that one of the things that's confusing for CDOs, one of the biggest challenges, is understanding where one application or one service starts and stops, and the next one starts and stops. There is so much overlap as you go between collection and storage through extraction, transformation, visualization, or science. There's so much overlap along that. It's selecting the suite of tools that works for you.
Every business will be very different.
Very different. And if you select one because you like that one particularly to fill that space, what's its relationship with the things around it? Is it doing half the work of that one, but you really like that one? So I think sort of getting best value for money alongside the best functionality is going to be the biggest challenge. And it's a fast-moving marketplace.
And that's why I've never worked in any industry before where actually you're sharing so much with actually the technology partners. I mean, we have technology partners, we have to, because I think gone are the days where you think you can do everything. I believe it's impossible. So we've just got to be open. So this is kind of a warning for all the technology businesses out there that we need to be speaking to each other. Is to stop viewing everyone as a competitor and actually view everyone as a partner.
And I think that a lot of CEOs would wish to say we're technology agnostic. We just want to deliver value to the business, and we want to do it in the most cost-effective and efficient way. Ideal world, you want to say best of breed. Right the way through, best of breed.
Really interesting. So, what do you think the focus will be for companies in the next 5 years? Obviously, technology will keep changing, so that will be something one. But
I think currently a lot of the focus at the minute is on delivering business value through analytics. But I think that increasingly we're all going to understand that getting the basics right is really important. Getting data quality, data standards right, and getting data stored in a place where you can understand it and you can control it and you can measure data quality and then release that into the business. I think we've got nice shiny things over here, but I think in the next 18 months we're going to go back and really look at here. So I think data warehousing has been and gone, and it might be coming back again as a different name, as a different thing.
Yep.
So I think that in the next 18 months, I think this is the analytics stuff is almost taken as read. There's a lot of platform stuff, a lot of stuff you can do very quickly. But we'll come back to the nitty-gritty hard stuff.
Which actually positions the our tech very well with the likes of Snowflake, for instance, is really, really well positioned. And actually, the more of those kind of techs, I guess, that come in, it will drive innovation.
Yeah.
It's funny, actually, that question, I was half expecting to say GDPR, because everyone talks about it, but funnily enough, until we haven't mentioned it.
I hope we're going to get through half an hour without saying it.
I feel the same, I'm not going to lie, but I guess that will come up. So, what's your very quick kind of 2-minute view of it?
GDPR is a challenge for everybody. I think part of the challenge is not only getting your data sorted out, I think that's why we're going to get that shift back into getting the basics right. But it's a challenge because there is no clear definition of what compliance looks like. Is there compliance? No, not really. And it's going to be an ongoing journey past May. So I think it's quite confusing for organisations as to where you should be by May and how you deal with the hard stuff back there. We all know that it's a good thing. It is a good thing. GDPR is a good thing because it's resetting our sights and our focus on actually handling data properly.
Which I'm quite surprised that the open banking initiative has actually been what was last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was recently. Yes.
I was quite surprised that they didn't do that after GDPR. What was the reason for that? Do you know?
No idea, but I think that there is some conflict between financial regulators, even though it's not open conflict, I hasten to add. But I think for those people in sectors, there is a conflict between some of the requirements of open banking and some of the requirements of GDPR. I think we've yet to resolve some of those conflicts.
That'll be interesting. It's 18th of May, isn't it?
25th of May.
25th of May. So clock's ticking. So we've got GDPR out of the way. I apologise I brought it up. So actually, next last question actually before we go on to actually, I've just seen loads of things firing up. So we'll go on to some of the audience questions in a second. Is your book? What was the biggest challenge in writing it, and what was the 1 or 2 big messages you'd like people to take away? Without giving any spoilers, actually, because obviously not everyone would have read it yet.
The biggest challenge, without doubt, was the timescale we set ourselves. We had the idea in November 2016. We had to deliver the manuscript by June 2017 for publication in November. So the biggest challenge was the timescale and the amount we wanted to say. We're both passionate about data and a vast number of things we wanted to talk about. Biggest message is organisations need CDOs, and I hope it helps organisations make a case for having a CDO and the importance and the role of that CDO within the business. And I hope it's built upon a lot of conversations with friends and colleagues and brought together stuff that I hope will just help us all.
Absolutely, I do encourage everybody to read it. And how did you actually find writing it while doing your day job as well? Because obviously most people just are full-time authors and novelists and what have you, and then that's all they do. But you've obviously got to pin down your day job with it.
Yeah, and Caroline and I both changed jobs during that period of time as well.
I didn't realise that.
To be honest, I think it comes out of actually loving the subject matter. It wasn't a challenge to write. So you didn't mind sitting down and doing it.
Did it actually help you with your day job as well?
Yeah. It provided an opportunity for a lot of thought clarification, for a lot of reflecting on what we were doing and how we were doing things and what other people were saying they were doing. I think that's a good idea. So yeah, it did help.
Interesting. Well, thanks so much for that. Those are all the questions that I've written down. I apologise if I was looking at the table. I was just checking to make sure that I was reading the right questions and no one would stitch me up. So there looks like there's a few that have come through. So Steve George at BMA, given what you've just described about the market, Peter, do you think one version of Achievable, and do you consider this a key driver?
Looking at the bit above, one version of the truth.
Yes.
In very simple terms, yes, I do think one version of the truth is the key driver. I think a lot of organisations have siloed data repeated all over the place, and there's full governance between them. So one version of the truth is really important to an organisation. I say in simple terms because I think one version of the truth is a bit more complex, a bit more nuanced than that. I think you can have multiple versions of the same truth, depending on where you're viewing it from and what you're going to use it for. As long as it's governed, I think governed versions of the truth is what you need. And it is a driver, without a doubt.
That's interesting. And actually, Stuart, hi Stuart, says that he actually views that there's no single version of the truth, but single versions of the fact.
Totally agree.
What you said. He has sent a link. So, Stuart, thank you for sharing that. Obviously, it will be a bit difficult for me to share that, but I'll definitely have a look at it. But so that looks like there's all the audience questions. So, but actually, likewise, if anybody's got any other questions for Peter, I'm sure you wouldn't mind if they email us and we'll pass them on, and then we'll send them directly to you if that's okay. Oh, another one has popped up. Ah, perfect. That's good. I won't read that out. So the only thing I've left to say really is thank you very much for your time. I know how busy you are, although you're not writing another book. Oh, you're writing another book?
We are.
Oh,
yes.
Well. Good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
But certainly from the Keboola side of things, we've got lots of other webinars and we'll be carrying on doing lots of interviews. You never know. Hopefully Peter might come back and tell us about his next book. But please look out for our other webinars and thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Cheers. Thank you.